Hey everyone, Kevin here, and today I wanted to share with you an idea I've been cooking up for quite a while now. See, anime has been a part of my life for a long time now, and one of the first ones that left an impact on me was the Dragon Ball series. However, the surprising part of this story is that after familiarizing myself with that series, perhaps the first installment of it that I actually kept up with was Dragon Ball GT after it aired on Cartoon Network. For better or worse. Now, regardless of how things turned out, GT offered a handful of ideas that gripped me as a young viewer, from the journey across the galaxy, to the vengeful parasitic body snatchers, to the iconic Super Saiyan 4 transformation, which I personally still prefer to any of the god forms we got more recently. Although the piece of lore we got in GT that I believe tops the rest is the final antagonists of the series, the 7 Shadow Dragons. When this idea was first introduced, I was enthralled at the potential of these new enemies. The greedy overusage of the magical wish-granting MacGuffins the franchise was built around, turning around and becoming its final threat, is thematically brilliant. Unfortunately, much like many of GT's other concepts, it left a lot to be desired in terms of execution. Most of the dragons are relegated to joke characters, with only 3 of them really feeling like legitimate challenges in the end. So ever since I was a kid, the creative mind in me couldn't help but wonder what things would be like if GT had just played them straight and made these villains the world-ending disasters they could have been. So that's what I intend to accomplish today. Now, just to make this clear up front, this isn't to say that I could have written or produced this saga better than those who actually made the show. I may have my criticisms, but I'm just one guy trying to have fun with a property near and dear to me. So, if you'll join me today, I'd be happy to share what my remixed versions of GT Shadow Dragons might look like. We'll start off with the 2-star dragon, Haze Shenron, who's probably one of the most dramatically changed of the bunch I have here. Now, in the original, he's created from the wish to revive Bora from all the way back in Dragon Ball proper, and I wanted to keep that the same with my version to cement Haze as the polar opposite of Bora here. So, whereas Bora was strong, valiant, and cared about his people and the environment itself, Haze is more conniving, toxic to the core, and is physically the weakest of the dragons. He's fully aware of this fact too, even though he won't admit it. But what he lacks in strength, he makes up for in his underhanded tactics. See, I'm expanding on his original power set of expelling poisons and turning him into a summoner archetype with a lot of debuffs in his kit. He would be seen spreading a noxious fog across entire cities both to conceal himself and to infect anyone brave enough to face him. His haze would gradually sap the ki from anyone within this area of effect, adding a sort of ticking clock to the encounter with this dragon. His opponent would need to find and overpower him before the smoke clouds he calls his lair do them in first. On top of that, the summoning powers I mentioned earlier would make this even more difficult, as Haze also has the ability to raise those he's killed in his smoke as enhanced undead warriors, effectively making him a necromancer. I even gave him bone-like armor and a Grim Reaper scythe to complete this motif. I had a great time experimenting with effects on the latter to make that work. This guy turned to be such a devious little weasel, and I love how he shaped up in the end. So, let's take a look at our first of the 7 here. Moving on to the opposite end of the list, the next of the bunch that I redesigned was the 7-star dragon, Naturon Shenron. This is one that I pretty much completely remade, as the original is actually the least dragon-like of the team. He's a mole for some reason, and then he turns into a bigger mole as he absorbs people. I'll be honest, I don't know what they were going for here, but I'm gonna take things in a different direction. For starters, you'll notice that I'm actually making this one female because the only female member of the original team was Oceanus, and I want to diversify this set a bit more. I'm also making her a walking tank given the fact that she represents the earth element, and I thought that suited a tank build very well, with her having bulky rock-like plates of armor all over her. You'll notice that I take inspiration from Ajdaha, a similar earth dragon from Genshin Impact, for a lot of those rockier elements, as he has the type of build and dragon turtle theme that I wanted to give Naturon here. In addition, unlike with Haze, I actually changed the wish that Naturon is themed after too. Since I had the benefit of hindsight with this project, and it's been over 20 years of Dragon Ball content since GT was made, I wanted to incorporate some more recent and unique wishes made into this. As for my version of Naturon, she was created from the wish to unlock Piccolo's full potential that gave him his latest orange form. I decided on this one in particular because Orange Piccolo has a similar body style and colors to what I wanted for Naturon, and this form does also partially represent the Namekian respect for nature, similar to where Naturon draws her power from. The thematic contrast here would be that while Piccolo made his wish in a desperate attempt to grow stronger and save lives, Naturon uses her strength to revel in the violence and carnage it enables her to bring by toppling buildings and raising volcanic hell from the ground. The fact that Bulma also used the other wishes from this summoning set for cosmetic changes on herself could also be a subtle reason why Naturon is female in this version. Regardless, this rendition of Naturon is truly a force of nature, and few have the power necessary to break her impenetrable wall of brutish muscle. So, with all that said, let's wrap up the Brawler of the Shadow Dragons, Naturon Shenron. Next up on our list here is the lightning elemental of a lizard known as Haze Shenron. Now, in a similar vein to some of my other redesigns, I wanted to make Rage another more unique form of dragon representation. So I thought, what's another famous type of dragon that I could pull from for this? Well, how about one of the most famous types there is, the Hydra. I have this really exciting idea to have these sort of tendrils extending from Rage's body, each one with a fanged mouth at the end where he could fire a bolt of lightning. And to make that idea work, I gave him this sleek curved suit of armor that I could naturally fit the heads into, as if you wouldn't know he had them tucked up his sleeve until he's ready to strike. As you can see, I used some various concepts from Frieza's race, as well as Nico Bolas from Magic the Gathering, to tie the whole thing together. I really like how this design gives Rage an almost cybernetic feel to him, while still appearing as though his armor is natural. And that actually transitions pretty well into what I changed about his origin. This version of Rage was spawned from the gathering of the Dragon Balls that both revived those killed by Cell and eliminated the bombs within androids 17 and 18. I thought this would be a good fit since Cell and the androids themselves are cybernetic and therefore have ties with electricity, the element Rage has control over. Rage being a Hydra could also reference how Cell was an amalgamation of several different fighters, much like how this dragon has several different heads that he can attack with. Not to mention, I thought the bombs could be incorporated into these concentrated electrical projectile attacks as well as an explosive temper befitting the name he was given. Now as I finish this piece with some sparking effects, let's take a look at the completed Haze Shenron. The next of the dragons I have here is the Wicked Witch of Water and Wind, Oceanus Shenron. Now, this is where we start to transition towards the dragons whose designs I don't really have a lot of issues with. My main issue here is that while I like her disguised form as a character design, I don't like it as a shadow dragon design specifically. When all the other 6 are clearly reptilian in some way, again except for Naturon, the fact that Oceanus looks like a regular girl with seafoam colors makes her stick out like a sore thumb. I know it's a vanity thing since she does have a more dragon-like true form, but I just don't think that's necessary for a character who's supposed to be bent on bringing catastrophe to the world as a sort of divine punishment for the misuse of the Dragon Balls. Therefore, what I've done here is essentially combine both of Oceanus' original designs from the anime into one dragon with a few elements of sea dragon mixed in, both the fantasy kind and the close cousins to the seahorse. Having these large fins and sea dragon frills, I feel really emphasize her as a magical beast from the ocean, the perfect mix of beauty and power. Now as for her wish, I pulled another one from modern Dragon Ball that didn't exist back when Oceanus was first conceived. This version of Oceanus is a result of the wish that gave Goku and friends the knowledge to complete the Super Saiyan God ritual. I wanted to give representation to a type of wish we don't see as often as, say, reviving the dead, and I also felt this one would fit Oceanus since she's more of a ritualistic style of combatant, using magical long-range elemental attacks. Speaking of which, you'll see that I add some of those hurricanes and riptide she uses in battle here, as we'll see the finished redesign of Oceanus Shenron. Next up, we actually have a 2-for-1 featuring the terrible twin titans of Nuova and Eis Shenron. Again, as far as their concepts go, I didn't have a whole lot of things I wanted to change about these two, as they're some of the only dragons of the bunch I can actually take seriously. They act as pretty decent foils to one another, being opposite elements and having opposite personalities. They even come from the same era of Dragon Ball, with Nova coming from King Piccolo's wish for his youth, and Ice coming from the wish to restore those killed by King Piccolo's tyranny. As such, they act as the inverse of their wishes as well, since Nova is more noble and honorable despite coming from an evil wish, while Ice is more sadistic and treacherous despite coming from a good wish. This is all to say that I really like those narrative parallels and how Goku compares to both of them in battle, so I'm gonna leave all that alone. The main thing I'll be changing here is making Eis female like I did with Naturon to add a bit more variety to the group and to add one more layer to the theme of opposites that the twins have going. I'm also basically taking the dragon elements from both of them up to an 11. Even though I do like the original designs, there isn't that much to them that strikes me as dragon-like in retrospect besides the wings. I wanted to emphasize their natural elements a bit more, as well as their scales specifically, since they have that ability to shed their armor when powering up almost like a transformation. I could see these two doing something similar, but their natural flesh under the scaly armor would resemble hot magma and solid ice respectively. As I tweaked their designs during this process, I wanted to tease that ability by having elements of fire and ice sort of poking out of their bodies, mainly from their tails, wings, and Ice's claws specifically. I think the one regret I have with this piece is not making it two separate pieces initially. I wanted to highlight the opposing motifs between the twins by having them be together, but I feel like that ended up making things a bit crowded for my liking, whereas having them separate could have shown off their individual designs more. But who knows, maybe you all think it looks great and I'm being too critical of myself. Either way, I'm overall happy with these two, so let's take a final look at Nuova and Eis Shenron. So last but certainly not least, we have the big bad boss of this entire broadcast, the one-star dragon Syn Shenron. Now honestly, this was another case where I don't have a lot of notes on the character. He definitely has my favorite design of the bunch, which makes sense considering he was planned to be the final antagonist of this part of GT and the series in general. So much like I did with Nuova and Eis, I mainly opted to add more draconic elements to him, like bigger spikes and an actual tail. You'll also notice I gave him this long mane made out of these reptilian frills, taking inspiration from Dark Shenron, which I learned is apparently a thing in Dragon Ball Heroes. Go figure. Overall, my thoughts for Syn would be that since his wish of origin is the one to revive everyone killed by Frieza, he would in turn be an ultimate force of destruction, a one-man walking apocalypse. I tried to display that here by including him sitting on a throne of deceased remains in a classic uncaring villain pose. Whereas I feel the other dragons would have varying personalities and levels of commitment to the whole cosmic balance mission they've given themselves, Syn is fully dedicated to the cause more than anyone else. He fully believes that humankind are arrogant insects that should be wiped out for their misuse of the Dragon Balls, and he's more than happy to play the part of Executioner. The other main change I came up with for Syn is the element he has control over, namely because he doesn't really have one. I mean, you could say it's just darkness and negative energy in general, since he uses more attacks of that nature than any of the others, but I thought he deserved something a bit more unique. He's meant to be the most powerful of the bunch after all, so his power set should be a standout for sure. After thinking about that for a while, I eventually decided on gravity. See, not only would this make him incredibly tough with the ability to manipulate a fundamental force in the universe, but it's also the sort of thing that has precedence in Dragon Ball canon. I could see him try to interfere with his opponents by turning up the gravity, only to realize that the Saiyans have been training in magnitudes higher gravity this whole time, thereby giving the battle a push and pull, with Syn having to get more creative with his powers than he's used to. Finally, as I finish things up here, you'll see that I complete Syn's throne and add some more effects off camera. So with that, let's take a look at the one and only Syn Shenron. Now, those of you familiar with Dragon Ball GT may have realized that there's technically one more Shadow Dragon I haven't addressed yet. What I mean is that at the climax of this arc in GT, Syn Shenron, being the last man standing, absorbs the other 6 Dragon Balls, and he becomes known as Omega Shenron from that point on. However, despite this being described as a fusion between all 7 into Syn's body, he just stays the same except for all the balls are on his chest now. It's hardly even a transformation at all. So as a sort of grand finale to this challenge, I decided, screw it, we're pulling out all the stops and making a proper fusion of all my dragons. Because Syn is still the one in charge here, I mostly used his body as the base, making him a bit more muscular to support all the extra elements I'm stacking on him. The real challenge here was integrating pieces from all the other 6 in a way that I felt made sense and wasn't me just smashing body parts together. For example, his new head crest is a horn crown made up of Syn's, Natron's, and Rage's horns. The frills around his neck and waist are a combination of similar traits from Rage and Oceanus. The wings are of course from Nuova and Eis, though they also have some flowing texture that came from Oceanus. The armor that covers his body is a combination of Syn's with textures from Natron's rocks and Haze's bones. Those 3 were also combined together when I was making the tail, in which I added enough to Haze's stinger to turn it into a full-on trident. Additionally, I added all of Rage's signature tendrils along with Nuova and Eis's scales all over the body. I could just picture each of the extra heads snaking out and firing a different beam of elemental energy from one of the 7. So as you can see, this was a massive undertaking that took a few iterations before I balanced things out the way I liked. Mainly in the inking and coloring, unfortunately. You'll actually see that I had one idea in mind for an extra set of eyes, and then changed it in between recordings, since this was actually done in multiple sessions over the span of 2 days. Eventually, I got it to a satisfying place after sticking with a color scheme of darker grays, blues, and reds. That, I feel, really emphasized the dark nature of this beast and kept everything cohesive, where it definitely could have gone off the rails if I let it. But with that, let's end this challenge for real this time with the dragon to end all dragons, Omega Shenron. Now, at this point, I feel as though it's only right that I address the elephant in the room. In the middle of me producing this video, Akira Toriyama, the creator of the Dragon Ball series, passed away at age 68, leaving behind a profound creative legacy that few creatives of the modern age can match. This hit me in a unique way, as much like a lot of other artists I've seen across the internet, Dragon Ball was one of my first gateways into the anime style of media that I basically live in today. I even found a few old sketchbooks as I was moving out a couple months ago that included sketches of characters that were clearly copied from Dragon Ball's fight choreography. I barely even remembered some of those drawings, and yet I was so distinctly inspired by this series I used to practice drawing fights myself. Namely the one between Goku and Majin Vegeta, for example. I don't know, that one very clearly stood out to me. It's no exaggeration to say that if not for Toriyama and his work, I might not have the art style I do today, or the same interests at all for that matter. So, although I know you'll unfortunately never get to see this, I felt it was only right to express my deepest thanks to you, Akira Toriyama. You helped make me the artist I am now, and our world was no doubt brighter for having you in it. So, with that, I also want to say thank you all for exploring this fun little what-if for me. If you like, feel free to comment your own Dragon Ball stories below if you would like to honor Toriyama's memory with me. Or just let me know what you thought of this little experiment of mine, and if you'd like to see me do more stuff like this. But until next time, take care, be good to each other, and never stop chasing those Dragon Balls. I hope to see you again soon.